Hello everyone, my name is Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is a Halloween special given that Halloween is rapidly approaching right around the corner. I do apologize I couldn't make any extra videos for you guys this week as I normally do on Halloween week, but I've just been so busy, so swamped with everything else going on in my life, so I do apologize for that, but I do think this case will make up for that. It's a case that's very scary and heart-wrenching, and so I thought that this would be a great fit for Halloween week. But before we get into the details of this case, I wanted to go ahead and say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Stamps.com. Stamps.com brings the services of the US Postal Service and UPS right to your door at discounted rates. It's an absolute must-have for small businesses, whether you're a small business mailing out invoices, a side hustle selling things on Etsy, or just trying to navigate the hybrid work life. No matter what your situation is, Stamps.com can handle it with ease. All you need is a computer and a printer, no special supplies needed. Once I started my channel and I had to start mailing out invoices and Patreon benefits, or in my personal life, living in a different state than the rest of my family, having to mail things out to them constantly, especially for the holidays, Stamps.com has made my life so much easier by cutting out all of the trips to UPS or USPS, which is honestly the most annoying thing about sending out packages and letters. If you have a small business, you know how valuable your time is, so stop wasting your precious time on trips to the post office. I get so annoyed when I have to mail something out, especially if it's just like a single tiny letter, having to stand there and wait in line. I remember one time where I was standing in line for like 30 minutes just to get a stamp for my letter, and that just wastes so much time. I don't have the time to just stand there waiting to mail out a letter. Stamps.com makes it so easy to ship and mail straight from your computer, and you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from USPS and UPS, which is awesome considering that the holidays are coming up and USPS has started their surge pricing, so everything's about to get so much more expensive. Stamps.com has been a necessary tool for almost 1 million businesses since 1998. Within literal minutes, you are up and running, printing out official postage for letters and packages. Plus, you can cut the confusion and extra costs out of your shipping. With Stamps.com's new rate advisor tool, you can compare rates and timelines to easily find the best option. Whether you're looking for something to be faster or cheaper, their rate advisory tool has you covered. Once your mail is ready, just schedule it to come be picked up, or you can drop it off. No dealing with traffic, no lines. It's really that simple. Save time and money with Stamps.com. There's no risk, and you get a special deal. You get a 4-week trial plus a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just head to stamps.com/RachelShannon for your 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. That's stamps.com/RachelShannon. Never go to the post office ever again. Thank you again so much to Stamps.com for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into today's video. Today we are going to be discussing the Halloween murders of Leslie Mazzara and Adrienne Insogna. Leslie Ann Mazzara was born August 1st, 1978 in Orlando, Florida, but she grew up in the small town of Anderson in South Carolina. Leslie was actually a former beauty pageant queen in the state of South Carolina, but to those who knew her, she was so much more than just a beauty queen. She graduated from the University of Georgia in 2003 with her bachelor's in philosophy. While attending there, she played on the lacrosse team and was a member of the karate club. After graduating, she worked temporarily as a paralegal for the county prosecutor and actually helped pass Stephanie's Law, which tracks down people with repeated allegations of child abuse. She also helped raise money to build a cottage for the abused and neglected children at the Calvary home. She had a passion for helping the defenseless and abused children and wanted to do anything that she could to make their lives better. But still, she was at a point in her life where she knew that she either wanted to be a teacher or an attorney, but she wasn't exactly sure what direction she wanted to take. By 2004, she decided to move away from her small town life in South Carolina and move to Napa Valley, California, so that she could be closer to her mother, who lived in Berkeley, and invited her to come out for the summer. At the time, she was 24 years old, and she was working as a sales coordinator with a winery in Rutherford, California. Those who worked with Leslie were very impressed with her work ethic. She was known for her charm, energy, and poise when working with customers. She loved what she did, and she loved where she lived. This job was just supposed to be a temporary summer job, but she loved it so much that she wanted to make a career out of the wine business. Even when her mother left California to relocate again to Michigan, Leslie stayed in Napa Valley because she just fell in love with the area and the lifestyle. She made a ton of friends there, and she was absolutely loved by everyone she knew. Next, we have Adrienne Michelle Insogna. Adrienne was born December 30th, 1977. She was described as being a young woman of incredible strength because she truly had been through a lot in her short life. She had to live through her parents splitting up at a young age. Then, at the age of 16 years old, she was involved in a horrible car accident where she was hit, and the car flipped repeatedly. She hit her head and she almost lost her life. She suffered head trauma and required plastic surgery to reconstruct her face after the crash. However, this did not stop her from excelling in academics and sports after the crash. She was in advanced classes in high school, specifically advanced calculus, and she played volleyball and softball on top of that. She then got a scholarship to attend Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and graduated in 2000 with her bachelor's degree in civil engineering. After graduating, she worked at the Napa Sanitation District as an assistant engineer in Napa Valley. Her coworkers and even her employer were all so impressed with her self-assurance, her confidence, and her ability to gain respect in this male-dominated career. Once again, just like Leslie, she was just at the beginning of her life, and she was really excited to see what her future held for her. So in early 2004, Adrienne had moved in with a friend named Lauren, and a few months after that, Leslie moved in with them into a 2-story house on the west side of town in Napa Valley. The 3 girls got along so well together that they were almost a perfect fit for being roommates. Now, the 3rd roommate, Lauren, has asked that her last name not be released to the media. I have seen her last name in some articles, but for the sake of her privacy, I am going to keep her last name out of this video. But either way, Lauren was an all-state athlete with a degree in political science. All 3 women were very motivated, career-driven women who had a great time living together in this beautiful area of California. On Halloween night in 2004, the 3 roommates spent their evening handing out candy to any trick-or-treater that came to their house. They ended their evening at around 11 p.m. that night. They shut off all the lights, and then Adrienne and Leslie went to their upstairs bedrooms in the house, and then Lauren went to her downstairs bedroom. They all called it a night, went to their respective rooms, and fell asleep, and everything was peaceful until around 2 a.m. that morning. So now at 2 a.m. going into November 1st, 2004. At around that time, Lauren woke up to their security light being turned on in their garage and to her dog barking. But she really didn't think anything of it because Adrienne did have a few cats, so she assumed that it was one of the cats that were setting off the security alarm. She started to fall asleep when she then heard someone enter the house and then go upstairs. But again, she didn't really think much of this because she figured that it was Leslie's boyfriend coming over, as he had just done a few nights prior. She was a little bit annoyed that he was coming over so late because Leslie and her boyfriend were kind of known to wake up the rest of the house when he would come over, but she didn't want to cause any sort of scuffle, so she just drifted back to sleep and didn't say anything. This was until she was woken up once again, but this time she knew that whatever it was that she was hearing, something horrific had to be happening. She woke up from the sound of a blood-curdling, terrified scream. She heard from the upstairs as Adrienne was screaming, "Oh God, please help. Please help." At that moment, Lauren jumped out of bed to go see what was going on, but she froze in fear, which is absolutely understandable. She had no idea what was happening, who was in the home, or what was going on. Everyone has a fight, flight, or freeze response, and in that moment, she froze. So she just had to stand there with the door open. She was standing just outside of her room, and she was just frozen. She was absolutely terrified as she heard everything that was happening. before hearing the person running down the stairs. Lauren described that this intruder was just flying down the stairs, breaking things as he was coming down. This is when her flight response kicked in and she ran out of the house. But in her panic, she ran the wrong way and ended up in their fenced-in backyard with absolutely no way to get out. So she just stayed in the backyard and hid there when she heard the intruder struggling with the kitchen blinds that were in front of the house. Then, suddenly, the commotion got quiet. She didn't hear this intruder running around anymore, causing a ruckus. All she could hear at that point were Adrienne's cries for help. So she knew, or at least really hoped, that the intruder had left at that point. So she bravely decided to go back into the house and help out her roommate. She went upstairs cautiously, having absolutely no idea of what she was about to see. She entered Adrienne's room, and the first thing she saw was Leslie laying face down on a pile of clothes in a pool of blood, absolutely covered in multiple stab wounds to her upper body and her arms. Then she saw Adrienne crouched down behind the bed. She was still alive and she was breathing, but she was bleeding profusely and was unable to speak. They were both absolutely covered in stab wounds, and there was actually so much blood that when Lauren turned around to run out of the room to grab a phone, she actually slipped in this pool of blood. At that point, she grabbed the landline and tried dialing 911, but the line was dead. So she ran back to her own bedroom to grab her phone and quickly dialed 911. She frantically told the dispatcher everything that she could before her cell phone line went dead too. But at this point, she was terrified that even though she heard the intruder leave the house, she thought that maybe he was still in the area, or maybe he was planning to come back if he found out that he left a survivor, or maybe he was lying in wait outside of the house. So she ran to her car as fast as she could and drove off and dialed 911 again. Shortly after, police and paramedics arrived to try to render help to both of these women. But unfortunately, Leslie was already dead at that point, but Adrienne was still alive. She was barely alive, but she was clinging to life. Paramedics did everything they could to try and save her, but unfortunately, she also died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. So of course, detectives started their investigation into who committed these atrocious crimes against these two women. They started by searching all around the home, inside and outside, and very quickly they discovered cigarette butts that were laying on the ground outside of the home. This was a pretty massive clue because they knew that none of the women who lived in this house smoked. So they believed that these belonged to the attacker and believed that he stood outside of the house just waiting, smoking his cigarettes before entering the home. They also found a drop of blood at the crime scene that didn't match either Leslie's or Adrienne's blood outside of a broken window in the kitchen of this house. This indicated that the killer had cut himself sometime during the attack. I also believe that they found blood at the site of the murders themselves just because of how hard these women fought back. They ran a DNA test, but they didn't get any matches. All they got from this was that the DNA belonged to a white male, most likely of Northern European descent. They also compared the blood DNA to the DNA found on the cigarette butts, and these two DNA profiles matched. But they realized that whoever this killer was most likely hadn't committed a crime before or just hadn't been caught because they weren't finding any matches in their database. Police also came out and said that they believed that Leslie was the intended target of this attack. The scene made it look as if she had first been stabbed when she was sleeping in her bed. Then it looks like she tried to run out of her room and in the direction of Adrienne's room. Then it looked like Adrienne heard the commotion that was going on and tried to help Leslie from this attacker before being stabbed and attacked herself. So because of this, police started looking into everybody in Leslie's life who could have a motive of wanting to harm her. Like I said earlier, she was well liked. She was really popular and had a ton of friends, but she was also very popular with men. She was absolutely beautiful, and she always had men who were lining up to try and be with her. But she wasn't totally interested in being flirtatious with a bunch of different guys. She didn't want to fling. She was looking for more of a relationship that could be long-term. However, at the time of her death, she was in between seeing two men kind of at the same time. One of them she was much more serious about than the other. But on one specific day, this man came over and saw flowers that the other man had sent her, and this made him absolutely furious. Police also searched Leslie's computer and found an email from an ex who tried to reach out to her. The two had broken up in the years prior, but this man reached back out to see if she was still interested. I don't know if there was a reply to this email. I didn't see that anywhere, but either way, this man sent this email shortly before the murder. That could indicate that maybe he had a motive of wanting to harm her because she either didn't reply or she rejected him. There were also a lot of other men who wanted Leslie's attention. There were men sending her gifts. One even sent her on a cruise, and each of these men just wanted their infatuation reciprocated. So there were a lot of different people that police had the duty of looking into in relation to Leslie. So police looked into over 1,500 people, did a ton of interviews, and took DNA from over 250 of these people. But of course, none of these led anywhere, and there was no DNA matches. Also, police have been criticized for pretty much only looking at people in Leslie's life, and they weren't really paying attention to anybody in Adrienne's life. But again, it definitely looked like Leslie was the intended target, so it made sense to look in that direction. So months passed with absolutely no leads, so police started sharing some of the information that they gathered with Lauren to see if she could think of anybody who would want to harm her roommates. They started by telling her that the killer was a smoker, so Lauren racked her brain trying to think of anybody that she knew that smoked. Now, Adrienne had been best friends with a girl named Lily Prudhomme. Lily had been dating and was engaged to a man named Eric Koppel, but the two called off their wedding. But then, after Adrienne was murdered, Lily thought that life was just too short, and she did decide to get married to Eric after putting off their wedding for about a year. Adrienne's mother, Arlene, attended the wedding, and Adrienne's favorite song, She Will Be Loved, played in her honor. The wedding was beautiful, and it was a joyous occasion for everybody who attended, and they wanted to make sure that they paid tributes to Adrienne. But still, there was a gap. Adrienne was supposed to be there. Adrienne was supposed to be celebrating this love in her best friend's wedding. Everyone who knew Lily and Eric said that they were a nice couple, and everyone thought that Eric was a nice guy. But Lauren, who had met Eric only a couple of times, she got a little bit of a weird vibe from him. She said that he was really this very shy, quiet guy. He mostly kept to himself, and he was not social whatsoever. But she still thought that he was overall a nice guy. He never really gave her any reason to think that he was violent or weird. But she knew that Eric was, in fact, a smoker. So she went ahead and told police about him and basically said that he's a smoker. Maybe you should look more into him. But again, outside of this, Lauren thought that Eric was a nice guy, so she really didn't know how much of a help this tip would be. Lauren waited, and she really didn't hear back from police. Police said that they tried reaching out to him. I believe they maybe briefly spoke to him at one point, but he wasn't really returning their calls. They couldn't really get a hold of him, so they didn't really pursue him too hard. But they still weren't really getting anywhere in this investigation, so to put more pressure on the case and put more pressure on whoever killed these two beautiful women, police decided to release the brand of cigarettes that the killer smoked, which was Camel Turkish Gold, in hopes that someone close to the killer would recognize that he smokes this brand and maybe turn him in. Many people who smoke tend to religiously stick to one brand and they don't waver from it. So if someone smokes, they pretty much always stick to one brand. Well, it just so happened that Eric Koppel also smoked that brand of cigarettes. Friends and family started to notice that he did smoke this brand that police were talking about on TV. And so they talked to Eric to see if there was a connection there. And to the surprise of the entire police department, only a few days after releasing this information, on September 27th, 2005, Eric Koppel, his wife Lily, and a few other of Eric's family members showed up to the police station. He knew that his family knew about the brand of cigarette that he smoked, and he knew that police were starting to close in on him and that he was about to get caught. So he confessed to police that he was actually the one who killed Adrienne and Leslie. So of course, right then and there, he was arrested and charged with double homicide. Friends and family of Adrienne were absolutely shocked and horrified that the husband of Adrienne's best friend was responsible for her murder. And then for Leslie's family, they were really confused because she had never even met Eric and they had no idea why she was murdered by him. After being arrested, police, of course, did take DNA samples from Eric, and they were a match to the blood DNA found at the scene and the DNA found on the cigarette butts. So in January of 2007, instead of going in front of a judge for a trial, Eric Koppel took a plea deal. Both families agreed to this plea deal, which took the death penalty off of the table. So he pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and was handed 2 life sentences with no possibility for parole. At the sentencing hearing, Eric heard impact statements from several people. Adrienne's mother, Arlene, talked about how Adrienne never wore turtlenecks in her life, but she had to wear one to the funeral and had to be buried in one to cover up all of the horrific wounds that he left on her body. Arlene also talked about how she celebrated with them getting married and mourning Adrienne together, this entire time knowing that he's the one that took her from her family. Then Leslie's mother, Kathy, read a 13-page paper to the entire courtroom. In part, it stated, quote, "For the rest of your life, you and your family will experience what both of your victims and loved ones have felt: terror, desperation, hopelessness, violence. I wish that I could tell you that I forgive you. At this time, I cannot. And finally, I pray that never again will any mother's child grow up to be a murderer." Through both of these mothers speaking to the courtroom, Eric would not look at either one of them as they made their statements. Then Adrienne's best friend and Eric Koppel's wife, Lily, spoke in court. And what she said was pretty upsetting to me, and I can't really speak to how Lily should feel. I'm sure she's really confused, but what she said, again, is upsetting, and I feel like she should have just kept it to herself or whatever. I don't know. Who am I to say? But here's what she said. She said that yes, she grieved Adrienne, but that she knew a gentler Eric. She said that in the days and months after the initial murders, he acted completely normally. He didn't act depressed, and he didn't act like anything was bothering him. However, shortly before he confessed again, when the pressure was starting to get to him, she said that she could tell that something was bothering him greatly. She said, quote, "In the days before he confessed, I could tell that something was terribly bothering him. I told him, 'Eric, there is nothing that you could do to make me love you less.' Those words are just as true as they are this afternoon." She made it clear that she would keep loving him and she wanted to be married to him, even though years later, I believe it was years later, she did go on to get a divorce from him, but she kept his last name. Then before the sentencing, Eric also spoke to say that he's very sorry to both families. He cried about what he did, and he said that these murders were because he was in a depression after the death of his grandfather. He said that he was using alcohol to cope with the death, but it only made things worse. In court, he said, quote, "I've always been an introverted person. My beloved grandfather suffered a stroke and died. I could not secure gainful employment. My relationship with Lily was in jeopardy and crashing. It was all like it fertilized the seed of my anger in my heart. There was a rage inside me. If only I had listened to those who pleaded with me to get the help that I needed." He said that he contemplated taking his own life after the murders before getting caught, but decided instead to turn himself in because he wanted the families to get closure for this case. He said, quote, "I'm a broken man. I cannot fathom an explanation for my sinful deeds. The terrible agony inflicted upon a great number of people. Words evade me." But to me, again, I think it was just because he knew he was going to get caught. He acted completely normally after these murders. Clearly, he didn't feel bad enough to say something right away. He went almost an entire year without saying anything or without acting out of the ordinary at all. I don't believe him. I think that he only turned himself in because he knew he was going to get caught anyways. And even with this explanation, saying that he was rageful and depressed, that doesn't explain at all why he specifically chose to kill Adrienne and Leslie. It can give a small insight into his state of mind, but why these 2 women? When police initially asked him what his motive was for these murders, He couldn't give an explanation why, and he said that he honestly couldn't remember much from that night. I do want to note here that the murder weapon was never found because he said that he threw it somewhere, dumped it somewhere, and he couldn't remember where. But either way, there are a few theories as to what could have been his motive for these murders. So the first thought is that maybe he was jealous that Lily and Adrienne were such good friends. Maybe he was jealous that Lily had this close friendship that he didn't have. He was a bit of a loner. He was shy and kept to himself. Maybe he was jealous seeing Lily and Adrienne hanging out and knew that they had something that he couldn't get. Or maybe Lily was hanging out with Adrienne a lot, maybe even ditching Eric, and that made him mad. Maybe she was even talking about Adrienne in a positive way all the time, and that made him feel that she loved Adrienne more than she loved him. It could have been for any number of reasons, but at the end of the day, maybe Lily and Adrienne's friendship just made him really jealous. Then going off of that, there's another thought for what his motive could have been. So November 1st, 2004, so the day after these murders, was the day that Eric and Lily had originally planned to get married before Lily backed out and prolonged their engagement. As most girlfriends do, Lily and Adrienne may have gossiped about the relationship, and maybe it's possible that Lily backed out of this marriage after Adrienne had talked her out of it. Maybe Adrienne pointed out some red flags that Lily wasn't seeing. Or maybe they had just talked about it and Lily already wanted to back out and Adrienne just didn't deter her. It's possible that the two had talked about it, and it's possible that they didn't. We don't really know. But it's thought that maybe he wanted to punish Lily by taking the life of her best friend. Or maybe he wanted to punish Adrienne for possibly talking Lily out of their relationship. He knew that Adrienne's bedroom was upstairs because he had been in the house before. But it's likely that he was only expecting Lauren and Adrienne to be there since Leslie moved in a little bit after them. And again, we know that Leslie and him had never even met, so I don't think he really even knew about her. But maybe he didn't know that Lauren slept downstairs while the two other women slept upstairs. That's personally why I think he killed the two women upstairs. I just don't think that he knew Lauren was there. I don't think he would have left a witness purposely if he knew that she was there. But what I still don't understand is even if he thought that Leslie was Lauren, why did he kill Leslie first? I don't know if he just confused their rooms or if maybe they switched rooms after Leslie moved in. I have no idea how that would have happened. That's one part of this entire case that still really confuses me. It absolutely makes no sense, and I haven't really seen it explained or theorized anywhere else, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys think about this part of the case. But either way, that's pretty much all I have for this case. My heart goes out to Adrienne, Leslie, and their families and everybody who loved them. This was such a senseless and horrific crime, and we still don't truly know why it happened. I don't buy that this was just because he was sad over his grandfather dying. Is that sad? Is it sad to lose a family member like that? Yes. And I can't even say how he experienced this because I don't know what his relationship was like with his grandfather. Some people are raised by their grandparents, and I couldn't figure out if that's the case for Eric's childhood, but I don't want to downplay it by saying, oh, it's just a grandparent. Lots of people lose grandparents. We don't really know what his relationship was like with him, so I don't want to downplay that, but I will say that lots and lots of people lose loved ones. I think it's safe to say that almost everyone has or eventually will experience losing a loved one in their lifetime, but most people don't go on to viciously kill others. I've lost several loved ones and a couple of friends in my short life, and I've never thought to kill anybody else because of that. I think that there was a lot more going on that he just doesn't want to admit. I think there was jealousy somewhere wrapped up in this. I think that he's just a sick person. I think he's mentally ill. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that he doesn't want to say. All I can say is that I'm glad he's behind bars and won't be leaving from his cell. My heart also goes out to Lauren. She has to live her life knowing what happened to her friends, having to hear them being attacked and then walking in after, seeing them covered in blood, dead on the floor, and then having the paralyzing fear of being targeted herself, not knowing if the killer was still nearby that night or if he was going to come back to get her in the months that she had no idea who was responsible. I don't know if it ever came out that there was a survivor, but if it did, that is absolutely terrifying. Then the survivor's guilt. She's come out publicly numerous times to say that she has the trauma of having survivor's guilt for living through this experience and having her life being spared. While unknowingly, I don't think he meant to spare her life, but that's still something that she has to live through. I just really hope that she's been able to go on and live her life as normally and as fulfilled and happily as she possibly can, despite this horrible tragedy that she's had to live through. But either way, that is where I'm going to end today's video. Thank you for listening to Leslie and Adrienne's story. Let me know in the comments below what you think Eric's true motive was for these horrific murders. If you liked this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn the notification bell to on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Don't forget to click the link down below and head to stamps.com/RachelShannon to get 4 weeks for free plus a free digital scale. If you have absolutely any case suggestions, please make sure to go ahead and send those suggestions over to RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. With that, I hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and happy Halloween. I'll see you next time. Bye.